Hello, I'm Lieutenant General Jonathon Riley. I'm a Royal Welsh Fusilier. I'm now the chairman of the Museum Trust, and I was colonel of the regiment, and before that I commanded one of the battalions of the regiment. The 15th Battalion was part of the drive to expand the army rapidly. Britain had effectively two armies in 1914. It had a regular force, which was partly at home and mostly in India, and it had a territorial army, who were part-timers. But Kitchener had seen as early as the autumn of 1914 that the war would not be over by Christmas. We needed a big army, and so he set about driving the creation of a new army. And this battalion, the 15th, was one of two battalions of the London Welsh, which was going to be raised in London as part of that. The 15th was the one that was to go abroad. The other battalion, the 18th, was going to stay at home. As well as being part of the rapid expansion of this new army, the London Welsh was part of a particular political agenda of Lloyd George and a bunch of other Liberal MPs who were fervent champions of Wales and the Welsh people. And Lloyd George had the idea that by using the existing territorial division of Wales, the 53rd Division, which existed, by perhaps pulling out some of the regular battalions that were scattered around other divisions and corps of the army, and by creating a new division, the 38th Welsh Division, he would be able to form a Welsh National Corps. Now, why did he want to do this? Well, the formation of a national army corps can be a very powerful instrument in nation building. You only have to look at the experience of Australia and Canada during the First World War, New Zealand in the Second World War, to see this in action. The creation of the Welsh Army Corps did not work, really for two reasons. The first was practical. There just weren't enough people. Even though Wales provided proportionately far more than its fair share of manpower during the First World War, it simply could not man and maintain at least two divisions and all the core troops, the supporting artillery and transport and engineers and medics and so forth, which would have had to have been recruited in the border counties of England and therefore substantially diluted the sense of Welshness in such a corps. The second reason was that to do with this business of national identity. If you have a Welsh Army Corps, then you probably also have to have a Scottish Army Corps and an Irish Army Corps. What was the big political hot potato of the day in 1914? Irish Home Rule. The whole business of Irish Home Rule had been put on the back burner for the duration of the war by mutual consent, and nobody wanted to take it off and bring it up to the boil again. It's almost easier to enumerate the well-known writers and artists who are not in the Royal Welsh Fusiliers rather than those who were. It wasn't unique to the First World War. It was a tradition that had existed in the regiment since the Revolutionary War in America, and which went on afterwards through the Second World War and still is there today. And it coexisted, sometimes uneasily, with the rather brasher, louder, sporting tradition of the regiment. But you're right, it was there. And it was very strong in the 15th Battalion, because as well as David Jones, we also have Llewellyn Wyn Griffith. Later on, we have Ellis Evans, Hedd Wyn. We have Bill Tucker, who wrote one of the few accounts that we have of being a prisoner of war in the First World War. Later worked on the Times, helped put together the Times Atlas of the World. We had a chap called Hughes, I've irritatingly forgotten his first name, who emigrated to Australia and wrote a very well-regarded book called Crow on a Barbed Wire Fence. And finally, there was Wyn Weldon, father of Sir Hugh Weldon, great BBC dynasty. Now, I can find no evidence at all that any of them knew that each other was there in the 15th Battalion. In the regular battalions, the 1st and 2nd, Graves and J.C. Dunn and Frank Richards and Sassoon and Thomas and people like that, they all knew each other. and they knew each other during the war, and they kept up their correspondence afterwards. But in the 15th Battalion, it doesn't seem so. And it's a bit of a puzzle as to why this is so, and there are some possible answers. One is that the battalion was a war-raised unit, and its focus was at company level. And in a war-raised unit, you tend to know the people in your own company, and you don't necessarily know the people in other companies of the battalion. You haven't got the chance to get to know them. The other thing is possibly that language was a divide, in that some, like Hedd Wyn and Llewellyn Wyn Griffith, were Welsh-speaking. Others, like David Jones, were most emphatically not. And so they weren't able to communicate their ideas. If you were to say to me, well, why is it that the Royal Welsh Fusiliers had this literary and artistic tradition? And it's not just in writing either, prose and poetry. It goes into painting and drawing, and also into the performing arts. I mean, Arthur Askey, for heaven's sake, was in the regiment during the First World War. So it's the arts in their widest sense that were a feature of the regiment at that time. If you ask me why is this so, well, again, it's a bit of a puzzle. I could respond by saying that it was from its earliest days a Welsh regiment, and the soul of Wales is intensely artistic. Okay, up to a point, but then again, quite a lot of the people who were involved in this tradition were Welsh by adoption. Or were English, like Graves and like Sassoon. So how is it? I don't know. The first day of the attack on the Somme, the 1st of June, the sector around Mametz was one of those areas on the Somme where ground was made. It wasn't all a bloody disaster, and some ground was made around there. And that was one of the reasons why later on, a week or so later, the decision was made to reinforce success. The second phase, actually getting into the wood, was very difficult, very bloody. And if you have a look at Llewellyn Wyn Griffith's memoir, you'll see how badly wrong it went at one stage, and how much worse it would have gone had it not been for the intervention of the brigade commander, who stopped the attack, which he thought would be suicidal. But the later stages after that, which actually cleared the wood, were, by the standards of the day, astonishingly successful. And again, if you look at Robert Graves's account, when he turned up in the wood later on and describes how there wasn't a tree left standing unshattered, the dead were lying everywhere. These great, huge, big, well-made soldiers of the Prussian Guard and the Lair Regiment, who'd been seen off by a bunch of volunteers from all parts of Wales who were often half their size. I think it was because he had joined the 15th Battalion pretty early on, right at the beginning, and therefore he was part of a group which had joined together, had been through its apprenticeship together, had gone into the line together, had served its time together, and then had gone into their first big battle together. And they took a lot of casualties. The battalion wasn't the same again after that. After that, it had to be made up with drafts of largely Welsh-speaking people from North Wales who were not London Welshmen. And so that initial flowering of the battalion wilted. It didn't die, but it certainly wilted at Mametz, and what came after wasn't the same.